So there was two distinct sessions to the conference. The morning is the review and outlook for agricultural markets, and it's very much geared towards a business audience. What we did is we looked back at the performance of the agricultural sector in 2013 and made a forecast of how markets are likely to develop in 2014. The afternoon session took a much longer view of agriculture. It's looking at the big issue of sustainability, trying to produce more food for the world's growing population in an environmentally acceptable way. So what we're looking at there in that session was talking about whether farms can be both productive and economically viable, but sustainable from an environmental perspective as well. So in terms of the review and outlook for the agricultural market, the big news story of 2013 was very much weather related. We had the very long, cold spring, with lots of rainfall and the fodder crisis, of course. So costs of production were very high. Now on the dairy side, milk prices were also very high, and this was very much driven by the bad weather right across Europe. So what we're seeing for dairy farm incomes in 2013 is an increase. Cattle farmers that were specialised in fattening animals also did quite well on the price front, so their incomes are also increasing. The other sectors like sheep, tillage and those producing beef calves all lost out in 2013. So it was really a mixed story for the current year. In terms of looking forward to 2014, the big story is that if we see more normal weather patterns in the spring of 2014, we'd expect input expenditure to fall back very considerably in the farm sector, and all sectors of farming would benefit from this. And overall, we're expecting incomes to increase by about 10% across all types of farms next year. So in terms of the assessment of sustainability, the idea behind the sustainability concept is for farms to be prosperous or to survive in the long term is that they must be both economically profitable but also sustainable from an environmental perspective. And what we actually find is that some of the best performing farms from an economic perspective, because they're very efficient, they tend to be very good from an environmental perspective as well, especially if we look at measures like greenhouse gas emissions. They tend to use feed quite efficiently, they use more grass, and all of these things contribute to lower emissions per animal and per product produced. So we're seeing the changing patterns across the different farm systems. On the dairy side, we saw farm incomes were down considerably from 2011 to 2012, and what we're seeing in the current year is a recovery back up to an average of about €58,000, about a 15% increase. That's driven by the very strong milk price in the current year. We're seeing losses in the cattle rearing system, driven by poor calf prices and high input costs. Some slight increases for cattle finishing farms who fared better in terms of cattle prices. Sheep incomes are down in the current year relative to 2012, and very little change on the tillage side. So that's the story for the various farm systems in 2013. You can put all of those systems together to get a sector level story, and what we're seeing in 2013, if we look at average family farm income across the whole farm sector, is that it's more or less unchanged. So while dairy farms and cattle finishing farms did quite well in the current year, the losses on the suckler side and on the sheep side mean overall family farm income in 2013 will be quite close to what it was last year. Okay, so looking ahead to 2014, what we're seeing across all farm systems is there's a saving in input expenditure, and what we can see is that this increases dairy farm income very slightly. We see a recovery in cattle rearing farm income next year, almost back to the 2012 level. Very little change on cattle finishing, and small increases on both sheep and tillage. Again, when you put all of these farm systems together to arrive at an aggregate sector story, what we're seeing is average family farm income for 2014 being between 10 and 12% higher next year than what we're estimating for the current year.